Jessica, and a very, very rare occurrence, I actually got my husband to do this video with me, which is never ever gonna happen again, so just enjoy him while you can. We're going through the birth story today, and he was a very active part of the whole birthing process. He was just as important as I was, so between he and my doula, they both were essential in helping get little Miss Tennyson here. She is about a month old today, a little over that, and so we thought it was a good time to do this video. It's actually this guy's birthday, so she was an early birthday present for him. I started having consistent contractions on Friday, which would have been June 1st. With that being said, the contractions I knew were not strong enough to get a baby out. They were very mild contractions. But they were very consistent. They were 3 to 4 minutes apart, and they were lasting, well over an hour, actually 3 to 4 hours at a time. So Chad typically works on Fridays, and so I asked him, whenever I was having consistent contractions throughout the very, very early morning, once his alarm went off to get up and go to work, I told him, it's probably not the best idea that you go to work today. We've never had a baby. This is our first baby. So I didn't really know what to expect from the labor. I didn't know if I'd have a long early labor or be like my mom and have a baby an hour later. So I asked him to stay home from work, and he did, and we kind of just hung out all day. It was rather disappointing because, like I said, the contractions would be very consistent. The app we were actually using kept saying, go to the hospital, go to the hospital. But I was like, these are not strong enough contractions. It's not a good idea to go to the hospital. So we didn't. And after like 3 or 4 hours, they would go away. And they would come back and be really consistent again. We would time them. That app would say, go to the hospital again. And this happened all day on Friday. One important thing to note was that I was GBS positive, so I needed to have 2 rounds of antibiotics before she was born in order for her to be safe. So, it would have been nice if my water had just broken, then we could have gone to the hospital and had the first round of antibiotics administered, come back home and labored, because you have to, the antibiotics are administered every 4 hours. And they just hook you up, administer the round of antibiotics intravenously, and then they can unhook you, so you don't have to stay hooked up. You can go back home. But you have to be in labor for at least a little over 4 hours. They can literally give you this second dose of antibiotics right before you have the baby, or right before you start pushing, and they're covered. Group beta strep is not harmful for the mother, it's only harmful for the baby, so it's essential that she gets 2 rounds of antibiotics before she's born. So that was difficult for us because GBS is very harmful for the baby, and we wanted to make sure that we got to the hospital in time, to have those antibiotics administered. But that didn't happen on Friday. So we went to bed that night, and I continued to have contractions. I was very, very uncomfortable, but I felt so badly about, asking Chad to stay home that day, and then we didn't have a baby, and people who weren't supposed to work were working, and so I just asked him to go back to work on Saturday. He checked in on me, but it was pretty uneventful for the most part.
Your mom came over.
Yeah, so he called my mom. He had the awesome idea of calling my mom to come over, just to watch out for me and let him know, or just be a support for both of us. So she did that, and the same thing was happening. I was having, consistent contractions. They were a little stronger than they were the day before, and this whole time I'm saying, is this labor? Am I in labor? I just don't know. Because it just wasn't remaining consistent enough. They would be the 3 to 4 minutes apart, but then for a couple of hours they would go away, then they'd come back. So anyway, I did not want to stall the labor. I wanted to speed it up. My mom and I went walking, we went uptown shopping. We're actually in Hobby Lobby on Saturday, and we had just eaten some spicy Mexican food. I was doing everything I needed to do to try and get this chick out. So my mom and I had spicy Mexican food, and then we went to Hobby Lobby to walk around and get a couple of items to actually put in Tennyson's nursery. And while we were in Hobby Lobby, I just started having very, very strong contractions. And I actually had like a lot of pressure in my butt, but I didn't have to use the bathroom. So I was like, okay, well, I know what this is supposed to be. That's usually a baby when you start feeling lots and lots of pressure in your butt, but you don't have to use the bathroom, as you know, as TMI as that sounds. Thankfully, Hobby Lobby is right there by the hospital. And so I called the midwife, and they're like, you know, since you're right here, why don't you just come and let us check you? So I went and they checked me. The inconvenient part is that a really bad storm came through, and so they would have me hooked up to the monitors. And 3 times while I was hooked up, the power went out, and they weren't monitoring my contractions consistently enough. They did end up sending me home without giving me any antibiotics. Oh, like she had a bad dream. They did end up sending me home without giving me any antibiotics because I was at 3 centimeters, and or maybe a little less than that. But they didn't keep me there. I thought, you know, probably if they had seen how strong and consistent my contractions were, aka if the power had not gone out 3 times, they would have, you know, kept me and just encouraged me to walk around a little bit. But that's not what happened. I got sent back home. So by that time, it was probably around 8:30 or 9 when Mom and I came back home. It was about the same time Chad gets off of work. And things just got stronger and stronger from there. I got into a tub we have here at the house. Well, of course, it's a tub we have here at the house. I got into the tub. And it just continued to get stronger. Chad called my doula, Christy, to see what she thought, and he spoke to her on the phone for a little while because at this point it was pretty late. About 1 o'clock in the morning.
No, it was about midnight.
Okay. An hour difference there. It's about midnight. What did she say to you when you called?
Just keep her posted. If we go to the hospital, give her a call.
I was so frustrated with being sent home at this point that I just told Chad, basically until a baby's hanging out, I'm not going back to the hospital. So I stayed in the tub for quite some time just to make myself more comfortable, but things continued to get, hey baby, more and more intense. And eventually I got out of the tub and came to a different bathroom that we have in the house, to the shower, just to let the water beat on my back because I was just so uncomfortable. And I was also getting really, really emotional and harder to console, I think. Yeah, and so my mom was still here. Chad helped me get out of the shower at some point, and we have all white towels. As he was helping me dry off, he noticed that I was bleeding. Clearly the blood was the bloody show, or me, you know, losing what's left of my mucus plug, which I had steady been losing for quite some time at that point. So anyway, my bags were already packed to go to the hospital. I had my hospital bag, I had her diaper bag, I had my birthing tools bag since we had intended to have a natural labor. And so everything, oh, and I had my cooler ready to go for the placenta because I had my placenta encapsulated. So all my stuff was ready to go. Chad did not have his bag packed. He insisted that he would just be fine and be able to pack it at the last minute, which he didn't. He ended up using just a spare gym bag of sweaty gym clothes that he already had in his car. We went to the hospital and they hooked me up to the monitors, and they said that I was between 3 and 4 centimeters. They can't admit you to the hospital until you're 4 centimeters. That's just hospital protocol. They encouraged us to walk around for, you know, an hour and then come back and measure me. In the meantime, they were really nice, and they, you know, said they had already seen me once that day, and so they were pretty sure that things were progressing. They went ahead and gave me the first round of antibiotics before I walked around for an hour. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Yeah, they did. They did. I'll call Christy and see whether or not that's true. But they did. Because I had the first round while we were in triage, in the triage room.
Nope.
Yes, we did. Anyway, this is why I wanted to do it sooner than now, because I knew he would forget. My doula was already there at that point. And so she walked around with us for an hour and things got super, super intense. So, I mean, I was like vocalizing really loud. I had some pink sparkly slime I brought that I made at home to help through the contractions, and I was using that. After an hour, we came back and I was actually at 5 centimeters. So they told us to, they admitted us and they got us a room and everything. That was probably at, what, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning?
I guess, yeah.
Somewhere around there. After we got into our room, you know, they called our midwife since we were using a midwife. And she came in and she checked on us here and there. Gosh, it just, natural labor is such hard work. It is a long, drawn-out process, and it's just exhausting, especially to be in it. You know, I had already been in labor for 2 days at this point, and once you get into active labor, it was just very, very strenuous. I can just remember saying to Chad so many times, I am so tired, I am so tired. I never wavered and asked for an epidural, but I was constantly saying to him, I am so tired. So we got into our room at like probably 2 or 3 a.m. and we didn't end up having Tennyson for another 12 hours. Because I wasn't hooked up to anything, the nurse would have to periodically come and check Tennyson's heartbeat with the little portable Doppler through 2 or 3 contractions. So it was about a 15-minute long process. They would have to do that every hour, every couple of hours. I actually don't remember. It doesn't seem like it was every hour.
I think it was.
Was it? Okay. Maybe it was, but Chad and my doula would actually use that time in many cases to kind of rest because the nurse had to be in there with me. They were both exhausted. Going from 5 centimeters to about 7 centimeters, I spent a lot of the 7 centimeter period in the tub. That was the most helpful thing. I was getting a lot of pressure in my back. And so I would get in the tub on my hands and knees, and Chad or my doula would hold the shower head over my back and just let the hot water run over my back. I would actually leave the stopper in the tub so that it could fill up with water and I could have just warmness everywhere. During the contractions, Chad would actually he would hold my hands and pull against me and count to 90. We started out at 60, but then the contractions started lasting longer than that. So he would count to 90 or count to 60 twice sometimes. And that was really extremely helpful because I learned in my birthing book that if you're pulling down from here, then you can't tense anything down here up. And tensing your body up, particularly your core whenever you're having a contraction, makes the pain way, way worse. So that's just a good rule of thumb. Pull up here so that you don't tense down anything up here. It relaxes all of this. And that's a good rule of thumb for pushing as well. But from 7 centimeters to 9 or 10 centimeters, I spent pretty much all that time in the tub, I think, or a significant portion of it. I was going from the tub back to our labor and delivery room, back to the tub. At one point, I started vocalizing so loudly that I think the midwife was getting a little concerned. Me vocalizing was how I beat the pain. The book I used talked about doing something that is more intense, that's bigger than the pain. And so as the pain would get worse and worse, I would get louder and louder. And basically it distracts you from the pain. And it's completely doable doing it like that, But when you have a midwife who hears you getting louder and louder throughout the birth, I think she thought I was in distress.
Yeah.
And so she said, you know, why don't we give you some nitrous oxide, some gas? And I was all for that. Like, you know, none of it hits tennyson. I breathe it in, and 5 seconds later it's gone, you know, just in and out of my lungs, and it just takes the edge off. I was fine with that, but then when they started bringing the gas in, they told me then that I would have to, you know, stay in bed and be monitored. And that would not have been doable at all. The thing that was keeping me going was being able to move around and be in the shower, and you know, I would not have been able to cope without moving around. So they sent the gas back. I didn't have any of the gas, but that was okay, because about the time they sent it back, I got into the shower one more time, and while I was in the shower this time, the water had actually broke. And that was right at the end of transition. So transition happened between 7 and 10 centimeters, and I wouldn't say that it was more painful. It's just with a lot of the contractions, you know, that Chad and I would count through, one reason that counting worked so well was because the contractions start slowly, and then they slowly build and build and build in intensity. And so by the time he would get to about like 45, I knew that that was like the peak of the contraction, and then it would start slowly going down. And then, you know, you get a break. It's not just constant pain. You definitely get a break. But what makes transition different is that the contractions are one on top of the other. And sometimes they don't start low and build in intensity. Sometimes you'll have one contraction that, you know, starts like a normal contraction, really slow, builds, gets to its peak, and then it stays there for quite some time, and then drops off and starts getting lower and lower, and then you'll have another contraction just hits you with its highest amount of intensity, boom. So you get contractions kind of one on top of the other. The good thing about this is that I knew that I was in transition, and I confirmed that with my doula, and she's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you're in transition. You know, again, at this point, I never really wavered and asked for an epidural, but this was the point when I started, you know, looking at Chad a lot and just, you know, crying and saying, not because of the pain, but because I was just so tired. I don't know how many times I told you during that time, I'm so tired, I'm so tired. But I know it was a lot. What do you remember the most about, you know, that period of time?
You're sitting in the tub?
Yeah, I was in the tub for most of that time.
Now you said you were scared after your water broke.
Yeah. So I feel like I was pretty much in control the whole time.
Yeah, you were in control. You could just, after your water broke, you could tell, like you knew something was about to happen.
Yeah. So I felt like I had maintained control. You know, I was good at being bigger than the pain. You know, being more intense than the contractions. You know, I felt really in control up until the point where my water broke. And oh, okay. And the reason that happened was I did lose control. I lost focus completely when my water broke, and I think what happened for me was that I remember thinking, you know, at the intensity I was at in transition, I could handle it, but I knew I could not handle a lot more than that. Like I was using all of my resources at that point. And so everyone says that, you know, when your water breaks, things start getting more intense. And so I was thinking, oh my God, I'm literally using everything I have to get through this right now. Like, it's gonna get more intense than this. I don't know that I can do that. And so when my water broke, that's part of what I was thinking. I started panicking. That was the first thing. And then second of all, it was really jarring. It was an audible pop. It felt like a balloon blowing up in between my legs, and it went, you know, and I felt it, I heard it. And because I was so far along, I had not really felt a baby going through, you know, my birthing canal before then. I hadn't felt like anything that felt abnormal, no stretching in between my legs, anything like that. When my water broke, I all of a sudden felt Tennyson. And I felt that she was very, very, very low, and I felt the urge to push. And so I knew I knew some real stuff was about to happen. And so yes, that is when I panicked. And that is when I completely started regretting not having an epidural, by the way. And I knew that there was nothing I could do. At that time, I knew she was right there, like her head was right there. I knew it was too late. So at that point I was like, why did you want to do this naturally? Like, are you the craziest person on the face of the planet? Why? Like, there's an epidural right down the hall. Someone could have easily brought it to you. Why did you want to feel this? But the crazy part is that that's not the part you feel. You know, you would think that actually pushing the baby out has to hurt so much worse than the contractions. That's not true. The contractions are the worst part. But I didn't know that. I had heard that, but when you feel that pushing intensity, I didn't believe that it was possible that I would push something the size of a bowling ball out of me and not feel it. But you don't feel it. All you feel is the urge to push. That's all I felt. So anyway, after my water broke, I started saying, you know, I feel the urge to push. When I got out of the tub, I felt Tennyson drop even lower. So like my midwife said, yeah, her head is right there, and I was like, I could have told you that. Because I felt it, but it was not painful. I felt that she was there. So at that point, did she give me the go-ahead to start pushing?
Yes. She said when you feel the urge to push, push.
Just go with it. And that was not news I wanted to hear. At that point, I thought it was probably a good idea to just pack up and go back home. I really did not want to push. I was terrified to push. Again, the thought of like actually birthing a baby. When you're in that, and this is what another midwife told me, she said, when you're in that moment, it seems impossible that anyone has ever survived this. And I don't know how you felt being in the room, but that's how I felt.
I've never seen that vein in your neck that's right here. But it looked like a worm right here. And you were like projectile yelling this way like a wild animal. And you could see that vein, just like the biggest vein you've ever seen bulging out. And I thought you were gonna, I thought something bad was gonna happen to like your vocal cords or something. I didn't think it was gonna be good.
So whenever the midwife gave me the go-ahead to push, I apparently went somewhere for a second. I black out at that part. I don't remember anything until I heard two very firm voices say, Jessica. And then I heard someone screaming, and I was like, ooh. That's a nasty, shrieking, very feral sound. And then I realized it was me. And once I realized I was screaming, I was like, oh, like as soon as I like came back to myself, I was fine. You know, I was like, oh, okay, I know what to do. You know, I just take a deep breath in when I feel the urge, and then hold the breath in while I'm pushing. Use my diaphragm. I knew exactly what to do, but it's like I had to go somewhere, like have a small out of body for a moment. Chad did say after the fact that he had never heard sounds like that come out of me before. And I apparently tried to bite him, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I do remember slightly feeling like if I bit something that would make all of this easier, but I didn't realize that I tried to bite him. So anyway, yeah, you were originally going to be at the business end of things, like and try to catch Tennyson, right?
Yes, but then I realized nobody wanted to get near you, so I had to be at the front end of you where you were yelling.
Was there a room full of people at this point? Like,
Your doula was on the left. I was in the middle, right in front of you. Photographer on the right. A couple little nurses, and then the midwife at the business end. In her flip-flops.
In her flip-flops. Our midwife was totally cool and chill. I loved her. So let's get to the part where I've already turned into a feral beast at this point. I went to the place, some people call it Laborland, where you disassociate for a second and then you come back. And once I came back, I was fine. Like after the screaming, I was fine. No?
Yeah.
I felt fine. I felt fine. I don't know how I presented. But anyway, so, you know, I started pushing, and the urge to push, I was wondering what that would feel like. The closest thing I can really relate it to is like the urge to puke. Like even if you're exhausted and you feel the urge to puke, you're still gonna puke. And that's what it's like. So anyway, started pushing, and there were a couple moments where we wavered. It was, I remember being really afraid that I was gonna have the ring of fire when the baby crowns, even though we had done perineal massages and perineal stretches and all that stuff for weeks. And the thing I was really afraid of was the ring of fire, because then you have to push into the pain, but I actually didn't get it. And so, you know, when I'm pushing, I had asked a couple times, you know, is the worst part over? And what I meant by that was, you know, if the baby's already crowned, then I'm not gonna get the ring of fire.
No, you asked if the worst part was over, and I said, yes, the worst part's over. And I looked back at the midwife, and I was like, and she was like, yep.
But the head had already come out at that point.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, anyway, that's what I meant. Like, if the head is already out, then the worst part's over, right? And I think the midwife was thinking, well, no, the shoulders are not out yet, so the worst part is not over. That part takes way more effort. But I didn't care about the effort, I just cared about the ring of fire, which I didn't get, and not all women do.
Then you pushed a baby out.
Then I pushed a baby out, and this is her. And she was 6 pounds, 8 ounces, 20.5 inches long, and she was born at 2:05. But one thing I will say is that, you know, like I said, your body demands that you put that effort in whether you have it or not. And so I didn't realize, like before I started pushing, I realized how tired I was. During pushing, I did not realize how tired I was, because you're putting like everything you have into it. I actually had 2 perineal tears, and I knew I was gonna tear. I could have taken it more slowly, but once I could feel that she was coming out, I was so excited to meet her and so excited to be done and not pregnant anymore that I like gave everything I had into pushing. I knew I was gonna tear, but it didn't hurt. So anyway, she was on the floor, and they said, "There's your baby." And so I went to pick her up, and first of all, newborn babies are very slippery. Very slippery. So someone kind of helped me pick her up, right?
Yeah.
Helped me pick her up. And too, my arms felt completely like Jello. So I didn't know this, and Chad didn't know this, but just kind of wrapping this up. Just kind of wrapping this up. When I went to my 2-week appointment, the midwife said, "You know, you're the only patient I've ever had who actually sat in my lap after they gave birth." And so apparently, I was giving birth on my hands and knees, and whenever I would push, I would kind of lean back into the push to kind of like a squatting position, I would say. And so as soon as I pushed her out, I was just kind of, they're like, "There's your baby," and I was done. I like picked her up, was holding her, and I just like sat down where I was, which just happened to be in my midwife's lap. Well, 2 questions. One, would you recommend that people do it the natural way?
Yes.
Why would you recommend that?
Just, it wasn't very, I mean, it was tiring, but it wasn't that it was that difficult.
It would have been easier, I think, if we had had an epidural. It would have been easier, but it wouldn't have been like an experience. I think an epidural just would have been like any other day. You know, you're sitting in bed watching TV, waiting for it to happen, and then someone comes in and says you're 10 centimeters and it's time to push.
Right.
I think it would have been less of an experience. I mean, this brought us closer together because we had to labor together, and we worked and worked and worked and worked. Not saying that if you get an epidural you're not working, you are. It's just this was definitely the experience that I wanted, laboring with my husband and kind of fighting for every centimeter we got. And then, would you recommend that people get a doula?
Yes.
Okay, because they're expensive. Ours was $800. Is it worth the money in your opinion?
Yes.
Okay, what did it help you with? Why would you recommend it?
I mean, there's never a point where we didn't know what was going on, because if you only have the nurse and the doctor, they're not always there, and so the doula is always right there, and so you always, like, you're never in question. You never have a question of if something's wrong or if what's happening is supposed to happen. It's like she's always right there to help you do whatever you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when my water broke and I started kind of flipping out a little bit, I looked at both Chad and my doula and said, I just really need someone to tell me that I'm okay and that I'm gonna be okay. And she's like, yeah, you're gonna be fine, you're doing great. And she always knew what to say. You know, when I would have a really big contraction, she would start saying, you are so strong, look at how strong you are. And I'm like tearing up just thinking about it. But like, it was exactly what I needed to hear. She always said exactly what we needed to hear.
Yeah.
So totally worth the money, definitely something to save up for. Okay. Good job, babe. So I'm gonna let him go now. But yeah, overall, the experience was absolutely amazing. It was amazing, you know, using that time to bond with my husband. We took a few classes in hypnobirthing together, and then we went through my birth skills book together as well. You know, the whole process was just a lot of bonding for he and I. And I asked him afterward, you know, I told him, this would have been a lot easier if I had an epidural. You know, would you ever want to do that instead? Because I know this was a lot of work for you. And again, laboring for 3 days, he said no, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it another way. I would want to do it just like this. So after that, of course, since we were at the hospital as long as we were, Tennyson got her 2 rounds of antibiotics. She got way more than that actually, because they're administered every 4 hours. So she was completely safe. We were in the hospital for 2 days. We contracted a pediatrician we chose a pediatrician that was contracted with the hospital so that he could just see her there, and then we could continue care with the same person. And it's been, you know, all downhill since then. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to add them in the comments section. I'm going to be releasing a few more videos about natural birth advice, things like that. More updates, of course, on myself and Tennyson. And if you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Did you say thumbs up? Thumbs up. I can't find your thumb. It's so tiny. And subscribe to my channel. Turn on that little bell notification so that you can be notified whenever I release more videos. Okay. Say bye, my love. Bye, my love.
Okay.
Okay. Friday, I guess, is a good place to start.
Okay. You look guilty. Oh no. Well, you had to save me.
She looks so satisfied. She's missing a shoe.
She stinks.